Okay, I think we're ready to go to the next group, which is myself and Bonnie here. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. This is the Fireside Chat, approaching a new 2022, the real keys to innovative deal making this season. And we are closing out the conference with honestly what we started. So Mitch and I yesterday morning started the whole conversation with the appetite for M&A. What happened in healthcare and life sciences last year, we had a phenomenal year, another phenomenal year in M&A and life sciences. We looked at it from a perspective of diagnostics, of biopharma services, of biopharma in general. When you look at all of the different types of deals, very innovative deals, very complex deals, and the need to do your due diligence and appropriately integrate to realize value, offset the high valuations and the rush to get the best assets on the market and get them quickly into different companies. And so today, I am joined here by my friend and colleague, Bonnie Anderson, who is the executive chairwoman and former CEO of Veracyte, an industry veteran, over 30 years in the space. Bonnie and I have worked together for many years in working through the diagnostics industry, working all the way through the different pieces of innovation that have gone through. And at the helm of Veracyte, Bonnie has really transformed a company from a lab services company all the way through to a fully formed biopharma services, lab-based company with so much fantastic complexity and ability to serve the entire ecosystem of life sciences. And what we're going to talk about today is that journey. We're going to talk about how she did it. We're going to talk about over the last year, multiple deals on top of one another. We're going to be talking about how she really looks at it from a perspective of right at the beginning of the deal, into the integration of the deal, and then into the performance transformation after her deals to be able to really take her team to the next level. So Bonnie, I'm so thrilled that we're working together to close this conference. I'm so thrilled that we have the opportunity to talk with you today and get your learnings as we really think about this. So welcome.
Well, Kristin, thanks so much for having me as part of the program. I look forward to the conversation.
Perfect, good. So let's start at the very beginning here. Veracyte, just even in 2021, rapid deals, strong deals in the space, international deals. Tell us a little bit about the journey. Obviously the company has gone through a number of different evolutions to get you to this point, and you have worked through all of that. Tell us over the last year, what was on your mind as you did those, and how have you transformed?
Well, I think to speak to why 2021 ended up being a year of a couple deals, we almost have to go back to a few years earlier when we were looking out and creating the 10-year vision for the company back in 2017 and 18 with our board. And to put that in context, as you said, and as you know, we founded Veracyte in 2008. We had two leading programs, one in thyroid cancer, one in lung cancer at the time. And our goal was to build a company that would identify indications where patients were taken through unnecessary, often surgical procedures, and on the back end of that, found out that they actually could have avoided that procedure if they would have had a better test. Thyroid is a great way to play that out. And then following that, we were able to enter lung cancer and then IPF. And in 2017, after our IPO, we sort of stood back as a board and said, okay, Veracyte has been successful now, one of the few in our space of bringing 3 impactful tests to market in 3 different major markets: thyroid cancer, lung cancer, interstitial lung disease. All of those covered by Medicare, which by itself, as you all know, is a feat here in the US. Getting reimbursed for the test means lots and lots of compelling evidence. But then we wanted to kind of say, okay, with that as our starting point, what do we envision the company being 10 years from now? And we looked at multiple strategic options. And what got us all really excited was the identification of what we believed would be a true global market for advanced genomic testing over the next decade. It had not yet emerged too quickly 5 years ago. There were a few players playing in the periphery. And then we identified that what we believed would be a key part of building that global enterprise, which was the strategy we chose. We needed to be able to develop our tests on a platform that could be distributed to labs globally so that physicians and pathologists and patients could have their testing done there as part of the care paradigm, and not relying on samples being sent over to the US for some lab. I will say now with GDPR and some of the privacy things even strengthening in the global markets, this is becoming even more and more important. So in 2019, we announced our first of these 3 strategic transactions to achieve that vision, which is when we announced the access to NanoString's nCounter platform, which you all were involved in, taking that platform and allowing us to have an exclusive rights to use it as our own diagnostic platform. So that was step 1. We integrated that in 2020 and then began to look beyond that. We knew when we did that deal that we would ultimately need a global IVD development and manufacturing operation with global regulatory and the ability to commercially position ourselves to bring tests to the market to pathology labs all over the world. So in 2021, we basically solidified the full vision of that ultimate goal. And that was through the acquisition of Decipher Biosciences in February. We acquired the company for $600 million. There was a percent of that company in equity that is kind of an interesting twist I'll come back to. But Decipher was at a fabulous place of growing rapidly in prostate cancer, very large market. So this acquisition tucked in and gave us a large TAM that we could add to our market and a growing product that was just at the point of takeoff in the market. And then immediately following that, we can get into the nuts and bolts of it, which is kind of interesting, but immediately following that, followed up on the HalioDx acquisition, which allowed us then to solidify our global operations and acquire a company that actually had decades of experience developing IVD products, manufacturing kits, delivering to the marketplace, and getting regulatory approvals all over the world. So with 1, 2, 3 punch, we were able to solidify the vision that we had set about 5, 6 years ago.
And Bonnie, one of the things that you mentioned on this is the relationships you had with these particular targets before you bought them. So as I mentioned in my preamble, there are a lot of companies buying a lot right now, and some of them are doing very quick due diligence, and some of them have spent a little extra time. Tell us about how the relationships that you built with each of those companies helped you really pay what you needed to pay and integrate the company in a way that made sense for you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kristin. And, as you know, when we started this journey that required these strategic acquisitions, Veracyte was a fairly small company. I mean, we were maybe in the range of 150 employees at the time. Today, we're over 750 employees. So that gives you an idea of the magnitude of the transformation that we did. So with NanoString, it was kind of a very technical focused due diligence. We evaluated numerous platforms with the idea that we wanted to cut a deal with someone to get access to our own platform, whether that was acquire or partner. We were kind of open in the early days on what that would look like. So for us, the due diligence on the deal with NanoString was strictly focused around which platform is going to give us the longevity the simplicity of operation out in the marketplace, because as we run our samples here in the lab, and as many companies here in the US run their own CLIA lab to provide their testing services on these tests, they're very complicated tests. These are, 4-day turnaround, deep RNA or other sequencing is often used. Have a lot of training and capability in the whole workflow process. Well, you can't take a test like that to a lab in Paris and have them take on that kind of workflow. So we needed a platform that was ultimately very simple to operate, but was powered by a technology that gave us lots of breadth and depth for the number of features we could build into a test. And it just so happened the winner in that evaluation was the nCounter, which is super simple to operate, but the technology is built into a complicated cartridge system so that the end user sees it as simple, but we actually can measure DNA, RNA, or proteins and can put up to 850 targets in any test. So we felt that gave us the backdrop that we could build our future on. When it came to Decipher, it was a very different situation. We had known Decipher for quite some time, actually. We knew the company when it was founded. But at the time when we became interested in them becoming a super growth arm by greatly expanding our TAM and bringing products that were just ripe for market growth, the CEO of the company, Tina Nova, was actually on our board. So it created some interesting dynamics because Tina obviously then had to excuse herself from our board as well as her own, and both had to form committees. Her chairman of the board was also on the Veracyte board. So it's interesting some of the dynamics when you end up with, co-board members, which is not uncommon, by the way, in this space. But fortunately, Tina had advanced her company as a private company to the point of being IPO ready. In fact, that's what we were competing with in doing the deal. And the benefit of that, of course, as you all know, is any company readying for IPO has got all the diligence under the world going on by their own counsel, the bankers' counsels, the bankers, and everybody under the sun. And so we had access to a ton of due diligence that had already been formulated nicely into, a data bank and library. And so we were able to actually move through that part of the process fairly rapidly. And then knowing that their product was bringing to us not necessarily technology or pipeline, but products on the market that we wanted to drive growth from. It was very easy to review the published evidence, the guidelines that they were in, talk to customers. And so it actually went really, really quickly. As you know, though, probably the most complicated of all the due diligences was with HalioDx, who just so happened to be based out of Marseille, France. Marseille has an interesting history because 25 years ago, I was with Coulter before it even became part of Beckman Coulter, we all know. And I worked with the CEO of HalioDx 25 years ago at that company. So as you point out, the threads to people you know and the trust and the level of conversation you can have that may not have otherwise even happened. I think this company was well under the radar to most other people. But I had stayed in touch with Vincent over the years, watching each other's companies and what they had done. And when we did the NanoString deal, I actually had them in mind for our global operations team, but needed to get Decipher done first. But nevertheless, the due diligence became complicated because A, we were in the second year of COVID. Nobody was traveling. The language barrier, Marseille is a city in France, and the company was the size where many of their 200 employees didn't speak English, comfortably as anywhere near close to a first language. And then we had the complexities of diligence around finances and understanding the labor laws and work councils and all of those things that we would need to build into our operating model and our integration model. And so we ended up having quite a complexity of various teams, legal teams, consulting teams, and helpers. both tax teams, as you can imagine, both US based and France based, which certainly made the deal not so inexpensive from all of that standpoint. But nevertheless, it was essential to be able to get the deal done. We actually closed that deal. We signed and announced that deal without ever stepping foot in France.
Amazing, and that is what we deal with. And I think that what being on the ground with you on that, and having to have those shadow teams in France and in the US, and the complexity of all of the different components, we're seeing that all over the space right now. And because you had such a strong connection with the team already over there with Halio, even in all of your other deals as well, that trust and that level of trust amongst the team members made it a lot more, in my opinion, just smoother in that respect, because there was that level of, you know what, we don't have this for you yet, now let's get this together, let's work together on this, rather than it being a contentious deal. Now, I will say, and you've been in them in the past, you've been in more contentious deals where it just doesn't go smoothly. Right. And
yeah, I mean, you're always negotiating these deals, right? But it does help when you can pick the phone up and say to your counter CEO, at the time, hey, let's dig underneath this and get a path to clarity.
Yeah. And so when you think about it, and maybe it wasn't even with these 3 deals, but it's when you look back at this overall with the overlay of COVID, what have been the biggest challenges? And when you think about how you overcame them, what was it that did it for you, that helped a little bit more, that we haven't talked about yet? The relationships, obviously, and incredible advisors, but tell us a little bit more about how you overcame them. And then as we move into yet another COVID year, and we have to think about more performance-based work and thinking about that, how are you thinking about it now?
Yes, good question. I mean, there's all sorts of challenges that come with any deal making. In an odd sort of way, the smallest of our deals was probably the most complicated, which was NanoString, because in that deal, we were going together with a company and pulling a subset of their business out of their operation and continuing to share a platform, them in life sciences and us in a diagnostic market, as we would go forward. So from a complexity of how do you get all the terms and conditions and future anticipated scenarios covered in the agreement, was the most complicated, but we've made, great progress there with that. On the other deals, I think some of the challenges are, often companies that are small, like we're still a small company, but a relatively small company to take on a provocative deal strategy like we did. And so what you have to be really, really grounded in, and what it all comes back to fueling you to, have the focus and the courage and the energy to push it, is knowing exactly why this deal is serving your strategy and your vision. And if you do a deal just because you think it's kind of a neat, cool deal to do and it'll be a great add to your company, but you're not really well solidified around the exact reason, the exact strategic reason this deal is essential, of course, always ready to walk away, right? Because you always have to be ready for that. But that really becomes the grounding. And then also as a small company, realizing that you may need to buy help, which we certainly did. When you think about it, the dynamics of these 1-2 punch this in 2021, plus the raise. I mean, you think of this, we come off the first year of COVID, out, into the new year, 2021. We were excited to kick off 2021, hoping the world COVID was going to go away, which it didn't. But by the time 2021 January came, we were already well pregnant with, one, the Decipher acquisition, and two, getting to know Halio. That wasn't far enough along on purpose because we needed to do them one at a time. But when we announced Halio, we also realized we need to think about financing these deals and raising money. Prior years, we may have raised money in advance of doing the deal, so you already have it in the bank, but we knew we would need a substantial raise. But we were also absolutely convinced investors were going to love the Decipher deal because the incredible company, the incredible growth it would bring, the largening of our TAM, all those things were right on point. And the fact that Tina agreed she'd stay on and run the company. So we had to line up closing that deal in a very tight timeline, competing with our IPO, and then turn around. 2 days later, we closed a $600 million financing, the largest financing in our space of primary shares ever in the market at that point in time. We had a whole team of great bankers, Goldman and others that helped. KPMG was working with us through all this as well. We had lots of law firm help, plug, for Fenwick and others that are fantastic. We couldn't do our work without them. And so we raised $600 million. The investors loved that deal so much, the price ran up to $74, which we closed. The price on the equity that had been built into the Decipher deal was like $51 a share, the closing price of the deal when we announced at their request. So, that was another really interesting dynamic where we basically, they left $100 million on the table. But we got that deal done. And then 3 days later, so as to not lose momentum with Halio, we had to have an offer for them to go exclusive with us to get that going. We announced that in June and actually closed that deal in August. In the middle of all this, as you also know, I announced a CEO transition. And people have said to me, oh my goodness, like why all of this at once? And I want to answer it here because I think it's really fundamentally the timing of that decision was actually really purposeful. And that was that a company that is going to go from basically 1, 2, 3 small indications to becoming a global enterprise, quadruple the size of their company in terms of employee, have operations, all over the world. We needed to prepare ourselves with leadership in the company to do that. And we were a small team at the time. And so I won't get into too much of the details, but when I met Mark Stapley, who is our CEO today, I'm executive chair, Mark got so excited about the strategy and about what we were doing. It was almost like, let me get my fingers into this. I want to be able to put a stamp on making this a reality. And I had to say to myself as CEO, who, by the way, I did retire once from Beckman Coulter 14 years ago before I ever founded Veracyte. So I wasn't going to be doing this forever. But I had to say to myself in a thoughtful way, it is smart for me to choose now to hand the helm to someone who's fantastic and so capable of making this a reality. If I wait 2 years, I might not be able to find that person. So all of this got wrapped in a package. We carried investors through it. We got both deals done. Both deals are fully integrated. We're off and running. Mark just announced earlier this week the whole new global leadership team. And as founding CEO of the company, of course, I couldn't be more proud of where everything is.
I think as an industry in diagnostics and lab, we can't be more proud of you. I mean, I think that as we look at that journey, it's just incredible, right? And some of the acts that you've done, the CEO situation, the 3 deals at once, moving all the way through very complex and different deals, but all for the vision of that company has just been really wonderful to see, to be a part of, to work with. And I think a question I had for you is, as you think of your management teams over the years, and as you built those management teams, we always think about the mix, the diversity of the teams, the personalities on the team. Tell us a little bit about that. You mentioned Mark, and Mark is that dynamic leader. He's coming from Illumina, thinking about different things. you have always had a number of very strong women by your side, whether we be advisors, whether we be right hands, whether we be co-CEOs, all of those. Tell us a little bit about how you think about that as we go into sort of the new workforce of the future.
Absolutely. You know, our culture, and one of the other things I've been most proud of at Veracyte is that we have been named one of the best places to work in the Bay Area for like 8 years in a row. And the reason that is the proudest award is because it's based on employees, you know, offering up their impressions of the company and the leadership of the company and everything about the company anonymously. And so it's quite an honor. I believe the fundamental nucleus and key to that success is the culture that we've always had at Veracyte, one of being, you know, intensely focused on achievement, but also very, very open and transparent and authentic around where the company is, where we want to go, why we're doing the things we're doing, and getting employees excited about that 10-year vision, just like I was, just like the board was, and bringing them all along. Because I think sometimes if employees don't get a lot of communication around these things, they worry about, what does this mean for me? And so, you know, that the culture is really key. And you can't have a great culture, in my opinion, without a lot of diversity. And I've always been proud of that at Veracyte. We're about 50-50 gender diversity. We've got, I think, less than 50% of our total employee base. Some of these numbers might be a little off since we did all these acquisitions. But you know, less than 50% white Caucasian. So diversity on all sorts of levels. And I think that Mark actually believes deeply in this as well. We've got continued diversity, not just gender diversity, at the executive leadership of the company. And when you think about it, our new CFO is a fantastic female. My founding CSO, CMO, Dr. Julia Kennedy, is still at the helm now of our global R&D and medical affairs. We just named 2 leaders out of the Marseille operation to be on the executive staff, one overseeing global regulatory and quality, the other leading our biopharma business unit. And none other than Dr. Tina Nova, who is the CEO of Decipher, has been so excited about all this. She has stayed on and was just named president. And that's just a starting point. So I think Mark is as excited as I was over the years of making sure we keep a very dynamic, strong, diverse thinking, diverse experience team at the top to keep the company moving in the direction it needs to move.
So much hard work, so much done in 2021. For FY22, what's next? What is your, so as you think about all this, we can't all take a nap, because at the end of the day, now there's a company, there's a big company to run, there's a complex company to run in a industry that keeps on changing and morphing and doing acquisitions and not doing acquisitions and really thinking about transformation. So tell us about how you're thinking about not only Veracyte, but the diagnostics industry and the industry in general. It's an ecosystem in life sciences that we're excited about. So tell us your excitement.
Well, I've been in diagnostics for 40 years. So, you know, that gives you a little sense of how much I love it. But I do think this is, in you know, the one positive, I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of others, the one positive thing COVID has brought was the realization that diagnostic testing actually matters. In fact, it can be a life or death thing. And it's really shown a spotlight on what many of us in the industry have known for a long time. When you think about cancer as an example, what's your best bet at survival if you get cancer? It's finding it very early detection and accurate diagnoses and getting people into screening programs to accommodate all that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of now spotlight and positive thinking about the diagnostic industry, which is long overdue. Secondly, I think, for me personally, it's kind of an exciting time. When Mark agreed to join this chaotic situation and take the helm of Veracyte, it meant he and I figuring out, how does a CEO founder who pretty much hired everybody in the company at the time, and my personality and Mark as a founder was always all over the culture and everything about the company. So, how do we step into this executive CEO, new CEO replacing the founder transition, and do it with, grace and excellence, so that the company didn't stumble because we chose this point in time when, quite frankly, I would say the company could have been very vulnerable to a big hiccup. Taking on that move in the middle of integrating two major acquisitions you just did. And so it was, someday we say we'll write a book on, how to do this and do it really well. We both believe that it has been a really good example of, how to find the right time, be humble and thoughtful and truthful with where you have served the company as the exiting leader, and stay on as you need to help the new leader that's come in. So as executive chair, I'm certainly not the face of Veracyte anymore, except in places like this. Thank you very much. But I am very much working hand in hand with Mark, with others on the team. I played a key role in overseeing the integrations, knowing the team in France. I've been there a couple of times working with them. Normally, a CEO doesn't oversee integration, but in this case, it made sense. And so I was willing to roll my sleeves up and do it. And Mark certainly, was happy that I agreed to stay on to help with that. And then there's many other aspects of being executive chair where you can be helpful as the company takes on, this new avenue, this new chapter. And so I can still be part of it, and at the same time sit back and be pleased and smile at all the great things that the new leadership team, the whole team, is virtually a new executive leadership team. And it happens so smoothly and so well that to the outside world, most people wouldn't even know the company has literally been transformed.
Absolutely amazing. So thank you. And I think it's a new template for companies that are looking to transform, but perhaps don't know how to do more than step their toe in the water, don't know how to do more than doing what the legacy would do, which, sometimes is throwing out everybody and kind of just starting new. This real mix of having that legacy to teach your brand new management team, who is also extremely experienced, and you all being able to transform together is transforming the industry. And I think that that's really what we need right now. And as we go into next year of hopefully not COVID, but we just don't know, this new normal really requires new ways of thinking, new ways of dealing with the ecosystem worldwide. And you certainly have done that. So Thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for what you're doing for the industry. And that is our wrap for our fireside chat for today.